Somebody died.
Now, have you heard anything? A life is a life is a life, and it's that simple. There's no, this life is less important than this life because it was raised for this. It doesn't matter. It's alive, and that's all that matters.
Cheryl Baker devotes her life to animals.
How's your dog? Okay. Yeah.
Which is why she quit her job as a waitress to work undercover at another lab near her home in Philadelphia. Do you think most people in this neighborhood have any idea what's going on in that building, even though they live a block away?
I think they do now. They hide behind these brick buildings with no windows and no doors. I would walk down the halls and there was constantly animals screaming. Death was everywhere in the whole place.
So this is what now?
This is a material. It was a test material that we got, and it's labeled by number.
So it could be a cosmetic, it could be a pure poison. You have no idea.
I have no idea what it's going to do to the rat.
You know, inject this now into the esophagus.
Right into the esophagus. Goes right down there.
Now, is there pain now for the rat?
No, there may be some pain for the rat.
Discomfort.
I don't know, but it's discomfort. And sometimes they put them down and they'll go into convulsions. I mean, but that is the rare exception. Now, this is one of the tests that the animal rights people feel that we shouldn't do because the rabbit's eye is different from the human eye. But what we're looking for is an indication. If you had a bad material that causes a problem in the rabbit, it could very well cause a problem in the human eye.
But why do you use it if there are other tests which work as the animal rights?
There is no other test. There really isn't. They say that there are, but they are projecting it a little bit farther ahead than where it is now.
You just said you can't tell if the animal is in pain. The animal rights people say they are in pain. You can hear them cry. That's what one...
Well, sometimes they do cry.
Does it concern you in any way that an animal would be put to some discomfort, sometimes even in pain, so that a woman can have a perfume that for reasons of vanity animals must suffer? Does that bother you?
You do worry about it, but as I said, you know, when I come in here in the laboratory, it doesn't bother me anymore.
They were just trash then. They weren't living things. They were tools.
And victims of abuse, says Cheryl Baker, after 8 months at the lab where she went undercover. Where was your camera at this point?
It was hidden. It was a small camera. This is the dog on the table. They had him tied down and they were draining blood out of him. The technicians would go home at 5 o'clock and leave the animals in the cages convulsing. Come back the next morning and count how many of them were still alive. This was shot after hours.
Cheryl, in the case of the FDA, they went in unannounced after you did your undercover work, and they found no reason to support your charges. In fact, they said some of your charges were grossly exaggerated and wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. That's what the government said.
And I can only answer that with I was there for 8 months. I witnessed this every day. My eyes don't lie to me. I have no reason to lie whatsoever. I can only say what I saw. All of this is cruelty-free. Some of them, cruelty-free is what we call it. See, this says no alcohol, preservatives, dyes, or animal ingredients, but they don't test on animals.
And do you feel like that there's any danger because it hasn't been tested?
No, actually, I feel a lot safer because I feel they use already existing formulas that have been known to be safe.
So it's time tested. Back at Oscar Marino's lab, Terry Marino says that sort of logic doesn't add up.
I have teenage daughters, and if one of these kids were to go out and say, "Shall I try this product, Mom, because it doesn't use animals?" I'd say no.
No.
I'd say no. I want them tested. I've seen things kill animals that were intended to be used in consumer products.
I can't hide the fact that I'm making a living out of this, but that's not the only reason I do it. If you save one life or, you know, you've done something. I can sleep well. I really don't feel that I'm doing something distressful to the world. Talk, huh?
No, you don't want me to talk.
What's right and wrong with America's universities.
Join us for a special look at college life as CBS This Morning goes on campus tomorrow.
Wired for Weather on WREL TV5.
Love and guidance.
At 3 days old and chained in 22-inch wide crates. Once they're put in these veal crates, they never leave.
Brad Miller is the founder and director of the Humane Farming Association.
They can never walk. They can never completely turn around.
He is a leader in the newest frontier of the animal rights movement, the treatment of farm animals, which are unprotected by federal law.
Well, if he calls back immediately, it's entirely up to the producer whether or not they want to chain pigs to the floor of a cement-bottom cage, whether they want to cram 5, 6, or more laying hens in a cage just barely larger than the size of a record album. Have we sent any of our videotape to you? Because I could send you some raw footage. It's a completely unregulated area.
Humane Farming, Gary Mills speaking.
Well, that's true. New members?
This was the last Time magazine. We got a radio show up in Santa Rosa. We've been doing a number of these call-in news shows. This particular one is interesting because this will be the first time we have a veal producer and myself in the same radio studio.
The white meat of the so-called milk-fed veal is much in demand at restaurants and butchers. Brad Miller and his organization want nothing less than a total consumer boycott.
I want to point something out to you.
Yeah. On the way to the radio station, Brad took us to a veal farm that illustrated the cruel treatment he is fighting against.
They're never out in the sunlight. You can notice that the lights are off and absolutely no windows. You can also see that they're lying in their own excrement.
Yeah.
They have severe intestinal problems because all they receive is a liquid diet. So they have constant diarrhea.
Our guest today, in studio, we have Mitch Fitzgerald with the local farmers or ranchers. Mitch, I understand you can't have a veal calf run because that'll ruin the product, right?
No, sir, it won't. That's not the issue here. The issue is we put them calves in the crate for reasons of we can monitor their eating, their health. I can, if a calf does, say his manure gets a little, say if he gets a little bit of diarrhea, I can watch that. I can treat that calf individually.
Would you say it's okay? You could possibly raise good veal if you let them roam a little bit.
It becomes baby beef.
Becomes baby beef. But
Right.
we're talking about a different product here.
You sure are.
The bottom line here is what the so-called milk-fed veal industry is trying to do is produce a pale color meat. And by producing that, they are keeping these animals on a low-iron, anemic diet to produce that artificial pale color.
No, I do give my calves iron. I supplement iron.
What's the definition of anemia, Mitch?
Well, let me tell you, Brad.
Just the definition of anemia.
I had a calf. I unchained him out of a stall. He cleared the top of that crate, and you tell me this calf can't walk or he ain't got no muscle?
No, they're, of course, capable of walking, but you don't let them.
He does.
You don't allow them to walk. Oh, so they could take a step forward and back. That's what the veal industry considers walking?
Sure, come to my barn. All I can say is come to my barn.
Mitch opened the doors to his veal barns the next morning. Mitch, these cows look perfectly clean. I mean, did you wash them for our benefit?
No, sir. Nothing tickles me more than to see the sight I see when I look back. I see all them little pretty heads buried in them buckets and nothing but ears.
The Humane Farming Association is proposing legislation that would force California's veal farmers to triple the size of the crates.
I can't make money economically with the way the market is right now. I make money raising 16 calves in this room.
How many do you have in here now?
47 right now. It holds 48.
So 48
Sure.
when it's full.
Yes.
And if you followed the new regulations, it would reduce that to 16.
It would put me out of business, is what it would do. My main concern is health and being humane, and this is definitely humane. You can see it's humane. These calves are healthy. They act normal. That's the bottom line. So why should I change what there's not a darn thing wrong with? Just because of a lot of misinformation.
The Animal Liberation Front, one of the more militant animal rights groups, raided Mitch's barn last June.
What did they do? Basically, rustled cattle. But that's the bottom line always. Meat is murder. Not just veal, meat.
Mm-hmm. If you're right, it's an effort to change eating habits and in this country.
Sure. You know, I wouldn't ask them to do that.
Later that day, we spoke once again with Brad Miller. People will say, well, these are not pets. These are farm animals whose purpose is to provide food of one sort or another.
Certainly they're not pets, but simply because they're not pets doesn't mean that they should be tortured. Doesn't mean we should disregard their suffering. Yes, they're farm animals, but no creature